What's up everyone, we are back with another Dead Cells version overview. This time a brand new boss rush mode is introduced to the game. As per usual, since a lot has changed since the alpha patch, I am ready to go through all of the changes today and discussing these wonderful additions to the game. But before we get to the meat of the update, there are also some new weapons being added as well. We start off with the Glyph of Peril. It was changed from its alpha counterpart to now scale with tactics only, the former also scaling with survival, though I can see it scaling with both colors. It unlocks more attacks in its combo the lower your health gets. It felt like it was at its strongest when my health was hovering just below 50%, which makes complete sense because it shares the same threshold as the Frantic Sword to activate its crits. Requiring anything below that would be a little bit unreasonable. Luckily, the weapon itself is very good, at least in my first impression. Assuming that a good portion of the combo is unlocked, the damage is quite solid, though this might be another one of those range weapons where having the pierce affix is a must. The new skill introduced is aptly named Taunt. While it appears to have no cooldown, you can cause an enemy in front of you to be enraged, chasing you and landing its attacks faster. Meanwhile, you also deal additional melee damage to it in return. And just to clarify, it's melee damage only, not your damage overall. That's a mistake I won't be making again. While it has applications with the Scheme mutation, I would still be careful using it, as taunting seems to make enemies go absolutely berserk. I imagine it's a pretty risky move when using it in a boss fight. Finally, there is a new mutation called Wish. That's right, it's the Genshin Impact crossover we've all been waiting for. This mutation will cause the next item you pick up to become its legendary variant. However, the mutation cannot be dropped once activated. Before, there was a nifty trick you can do by just storing an item in your backpack and then dropping it, and using Wish to transform it into a legendary when you pick it back up. But now it has been patched. You have to physically find and pick up an item in your run. The only case where this could be useful in my opinion is if you can guarantee what weapon you want to be a legendary variant, so custom mode enjoyers will likely appreciate this. Other than that, maybe you're just feeling quirky and want to play with a legendary weapon, which is a more than valid reason, as given the recent legendary reworks. However, getting permanently locked out of a mutation slot is a pretty hefty drawback. You can unlock all of these goodies in the new boss rush mode, which I will explain more of it later. But before we get to the good stuff, I should also briefly mention that although it's not listed in the patch notes, the developers seem to be in the habit of shadow nerfing certain items. One of the victims happens to be Corrupted Power, which had a bug with how its damage scaled. So now the item does exactly how it was supposed to be designed. It was fun while it lasted. I would have preferred if these changes were covered in the patch notes too though. Alright, let's jump into the meat of the update. The new boss rush mode allows players to challenge 3 or 5 bosses back to back. Every existing boss in the game are now split into 3 tiers. Conjunctivius, Concierge and Mama Tick in Tier 1, Timekeeper, Giant and Scarecrow in Tier 2, Servants, the Queen and Hand of the King in Tier 3. There are 4 challenges that await you. In the first challenge, you fight 3 bosses, 1 randomly selected from each tier. In the second challenge, the same rules apply, but the bosses are modified versions of themselves, all packing some additional moves and more ways to end your run. Challenge 3, you fight 5 bosses, 2 randomly selected from each of Tier 1 and 2, and then finishing off with 1 boss from Tier 3. In the last and final challenge, you can probably see where this is going. 5 bosses, all with their modified versions. In the beginning of the run, you select the color you wish to play. Afterwards, after choosing a loadout of your choice and picking up a mutation, you're off to the races. Each transition area between each fight will contain a weapon and a skills shop to beef up your powers. I do quite like this change, as it was rather hard to find what items you were looking for to synergize your build when this update was still in the alpha stages. Should you complete a run, you'll be given a generous amount of cells to advance the Legendary Forge if you haven't already maxed it out, so at least all players will benefit from improving at this new mode. You also unlock some goodies at the end, namely blueprints for the new 3 items that I mentioned previously in this update. In addition, you'll also unlock some new cosmetics parts to customize a statue found in the lobby of the boss rush. You can customize the look of said statue with components you've unlocked. Apparently, there are new unlocks for beating each of the levels and at different boss cells. There's even something if you manage to flawless the entire boss rush. Yes, all 3 or 5 bosses back to back, no taking damage, including the final challenge with modified versions of the bosses at 5 BC. Yeah, good luck with that one. Your boss cell level also seems to take into account when you play Boss Rush, as how many flash charges between levels is dependent on it. While I haven't thoroughly tested it, I also assume that you take more damage and bosses are more beefy the higher your boss cell level goes. So let's talk about the new modified bosses. I certainly found some of them to be a handful, and even though I have not seen the modified servants or queen fight, I'll give a quick rundown of the other ones. The modified concierge now comes with a twin. Mechanically, they don't have any new attacks, but handling two of them at the same time can still mess you up if you're not careful. Conjunctivius now comes with more tentacles. They persist in the arena even if you're not in the tentacle phases. This is in my opinion the hardest tier 1 boss, given that you really have to stick to this flying eyeball to close out the fight quickly. And make sure to stay on the platforms for as long as possible. Finally, Mama Tick for the tier 1 bosses, surprisingly I found to be the easiest. Sure, she comes packing with some nasty tricks with those side attacks, but nothing you can't get used to. Onto the tier 2 bosses. Timekeeper has, in my opinion, the laziest enhanced version of all the bosses I've seen so far. She will start in her second phase for the entire fight, and will heal to full when her HP falls to 50%. Essentially, you're always in phase 2 in this fight, and Timekeeper has 50% more health. Not very exciting. The Scarecrow fight is a nasty one. Not only do you have to deal with the ridiculous attack speed, the boss will throw out more mushrooms and sickles at you. It's far and away the most chaotic fight I've seen. The Giant has, in my opinion, my favorite enhanced version of all the bosses. He looks intimidating at first, what with the extra arms and all, but his attacks are fast but fair, and can be predicted with good timing. It always felt satisfying dodging an impossible looking attack. Bonus points for being an enhanced boss that actually gives you ample time to retaliate. Finally, Hand of the King has some new moves against you, like chaining 2 ground slam attacks instead of just 1, and dashing 3 or more times in a row. He jumps straight into phase 2 as soon as the fight starts, but at least he doesn't heal to full health in the midst of the battle. Only we get to do that. He also skips the monster phase where he summons small fries to fight for him. So that goes for all the modified bosses I've faced thus far. They are a menace to deal with. To close off this video, and to reiterate some of my concerns prior to the boss rush update, I was worried that there might not be enough content to warrant making a brand new mode with different rules and conditions. But seeing that there is indeed a lot of replayability and reasons for players at all levels to engage with the new content, I think there can be a lot of potential. Now I do think that some of the modified bosses are a little out of tune difficulty-wise, but we'll save that discussion for another day. For now, what are your thoughts on the new boss rush? What has impressed you the most in this update? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. In the meantime, I'll be at work releasing a guide video sometime down the line for this new mode. But until then, thank you all for tuning in, and have fun with those bosses.